I hope you're glad to be here. It's a beautiful day, enjoying this cooler weather this morning. Next week is Labor Day, correct? And many of our teaching elders will not be here, so you may find me standing in this same place again next week. I hope that's not a disappointment. We're getting to know each other, and I'm enjoying being able to work through this very powerful series on the teachings of Jesus from Luke chapter 15, and we're probably going to conclude that next week. So if you'd like to join us here in person or join us on the stream, we would love to have you. The title of the sermon this morning, our study, is Shame on Me. I thought I would entitle it Shame on You, but I don't want to scare anybody away. So I decided I would fall on the hand grenade this morning. So it's all shame on me. And as we begin, I'd like to invite you to bow your heads with me as we pray. Father in heaven, thank you for gathering your church here, for the cool of the morning and the breeze. We pray that as we open your word, that you would give us what we need. Many people have come here from different places, different backgrounds, different challenges this week. But we believe that through the presence of your Spirit, you can speak to us in different ways, giving us, as a very diverse group of people, and those of us streaming online this morning, that you can speak to us and give us what we need. So we put our trust in you, asking you that you'd help us to understand your word rightly, and that we would come to a clear understanding of who you are through your word. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. This week, federal agents caught one of their most sought-after criminals. He committed his crimes 12 years ago. 6 weeks later, was put on the top 10 most wanted list by the FBI. He was deep in hiding, but he was discovered and found and taken into custody this week. Yasser Abdel Said, he was a cab driver in the greater Dallas area, a man of Egyptian descent. He had a wife and 2 daughters, and he had a warrant also out for his arrest since New Year's Day in 2008 when he committed his crimes, those crimes being fatally shooting 2 Lewisville, Texas high school students. The victims were found in a cab in front of a suburban Dallas motel. The 2 girls happened to be Yasser's daughters, Sarah and Amina. Authorities received a call from a family member weeks before that were concerned about threats being made against Sarah specifically for going out on a date with a non-Muslim young man. The week before the murders, the man's wife, Patricia, fled with the 2 girls for their safety. And when the aunt was interviewed sometime later, she said that her 2 nieces were involved in what could be called an honor killing, in which a family member is murdered to preserve the family's honor when that person engages in behavior that the family deems to be shameful. This is not an uncommon occurrence in cultures that are more sensitive to the dynamics of honor and shame, and it is not endemic only to Muslim societies or cultures either. Some of you may know Dr. Joseph Kidder. He is now an Adventist professor at the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary in Berrien Springs. I had the privilege of taking a couple of classes with Dr. Kidder. He was born in the Middle East, in Baghdad, Iraq, if you will, to an Orthodox Christian family. And he was beaten and threatened by his relatives when it was discovered that he was studying the Bible with the local Seventh-day Adventist minister. When he was baptized, if I remember correctly, He was cut off from his family entirely, went on to study at our university in Beirut, and then transferred, he says, to Walla Walla, Washington, where he studied engineering and eventually sensed his call to the ministry. It may surprise you that there are stories of children coming from families within our circle of faith who were disowned by their parents because they chose to marry someone that their parents did not approve of. These kinds of actions are performed in an attempt to neutralize the sense of shame that a family feels when their child or another family member brings a sense of dishonor or shame upon the family. What is shame? In his very helpful book entitled Shame Interrupted, which is a powerful resource written from a Christian perspective, the author Edward Welch provides a very simple definition. He says, shame is the deep sense that you are unacceptable because of something you did, because of something that was done to you, or because of something associated with you, leaving with feelings of being exposed and humiliated. He says it's the idea that you are disgraced because you acted in a way that is perceived as being less than human, that you were treated in a way that is perceived as being less than human or associated with something less than human, and there are witnesses. The language includes concepts of being rejected as an outsider, rejected because of your shame, the feeling of nakedness, the feeling of uncleanness, which is exactly what our forebears and our first parents felt when they were in the Garden of Eden and they disobeyed God and they partook of the fruit. And it says, the Bible, that they had a distinct sense that they were naked and they went into hiding. Isn't that the same thing as guilt, you may be asking? No, it's not the same thing. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt can be hidden. Shame leaves you feeling exposed. Guilt tends to be an individual experience, and as Western cultures, we tend to emphasize, specifically in the Bible, the gospel's power to free someone from a sense of their personal guilt. But the Bible repeatedly has this resonating influence in addressing the problem of shame, specifically shame in the context of community. And this is an integral part of the story of the prodigal son. Last week we discovered when this young man in the story of Luke chapter 15 asked for his inheritance up front, and perhaps we will read it again for those of you who were not with us last week. The Bible says, Jesus telling a story, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that's coming to me. He divided his property between them. Not many days later, the young son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he'd spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to tend to the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate." Last week, we discovered when this son asked for his inheritance up front, he was doing a shameful thing. He was essentially saying, "Dad, you're no good unless you're dead to me." And he wished that he could have those things which would only come when his father perished. What's more shameful, though, through the lens of this culture, the Semitic cultures from which the Bible came to us, is that the father did not put him in his place, but rather, as God does for all of us, to honor our free will, he honored his son's disrespectful wishes. Now, does this make his son look bad, or does this make the father look bad? When you're flying on an airplane, which many of us have not done recently, I can remember as a young man, and you would hear from the back of the plane or a few seats up, God forbid it's coming from right behind you or right next to you, a baby begins to cry. Perhaps from the pressure that will build up in the baby's ear as the plane takes off and the cabin was pressurized, or the plane comes back down and the baby begins to scream. And you're thinking in your mind, not necessarily, what's wrong with this baby? You're thinking, what's wrong that this parent can't keep their kid under control? I distinctly remember the first time flying with a baby and having that baby begin to cry and realizing, okay, now I'm that dude. I'm that dude. And since that time, when you enter into parenthood, it gives you a little more grace towards parents who are struggling with a crying baby, trying to find out what in the world is wrong. When you encounter a parent in the checkout line at the grocery store, and they're dealing with a child that may want a pack of gum or a piece of candy, and the child starts losing their mind, who do you place more blame on, the child or the parent? It's the father who takes the heat in this story in a very powerful way. When we read this story, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency, because this takes place in a rural agricultural setting, I tend to picture the rolling hills of eastern Montana and a ranch house with a wide deck, and the father going out on that deck and looking down the 2-mile driveway for his son to come home. But that's not what's happening. And that's not the crowd that Jesus was addressing. It's a very foreign idea. Though this story takes place in a rural setting, most farmers lived together in small settlements that were very closely populated and would go out and work in their land because the land was so precious. You didn't go out and build a big house. You would live together in these communal settings and preserve the arable land in the surrounding areas. This village, this tightly inhabited, populated village, is filled with your uncles and aunts and cousins, with friends of the family, with ties that probably stretch back from generations. You know who you're related to in this small village. And because of that, people know your business. And people talk about your business. When the father divides his estate between his sons, even though he was still living, the village knew. When the son sold off his portion hastily, it was not a family secret or something that the family could keep secret. When he took off for the land of their enemies to live a very loose and permissive lifestyle, the village knew where he was going. When he squandered his inheritance, the older brother says, on prostitutes. They likely knew that too, because gossip, unfortunately, gets around. And it destroys people, their reputations, it destroys trust, and when we get in the habit of sharing, it cultivates a tendency to immediately condemn someone when we've heard something not so nice about them, something that is none of our business to begin with. Everyone knew, or at least suspected, what was going on. And because of his actions, this boy could not come home. From the testament of Kohath, from the dead, it's not biblical literature, you won't find this in Scripture, but this is on one of the fragments found in the cave of Qumran along the Dead Sea. And it says this, "And now, my sons, be watchful of your inheritance that has been bequeathed to you, which your fathers gave you. Do not give your inheritance to the Gentiles." If you lose your inheritance, you have just committed a violation of something perceived as very sacred. Do not give your inheritance to the Gentiles, lest you be regarded as humiliated in their eyes and foolish, and they trample upon you, for they will come to dwell among you, and they will be your masters. In this part of the world, it's something that Westerners have taken a very long time to understand. This land is sacred. Family land is sacred. And to think that we were involved in something which drove an ethnic population off of their land to allow another ethnic population to re-inhabit that land, we have created tensions based on these dynamics of shame and honor that are not easily resolved. And we become involved and embroiled in conflicts in this region because we don't understand the social dynamics that hold these societies together. All cultures are fallen. The problem is we have a tendency to identify the unsavory elements of people in other cultures outside of our Western American culture. And we're very slow to admit the fallen aspects, the sinful aspects of our own Western culture. To reinforce the seriousness of the sin of losing your inheritance that's given to you as a sacred trust from your father and from your forebears to keep and to preserve this land, a ceremony was developed to put a little reverence and a little fear into the hearts of Jewish young men to hold on to what was given to them from their forebears. In this ceremony, they would take a pot and fill it with burned corn or grain, and when they would encounter a young man who lost his inheritance, they would cast it down, it would break the pot, it would scatter those elements, and they would say, "You are cut off from your family. You are cut off from this village and society," and they would never be able to return because of their sins. In other words, because of his shame, because of his actions, because of his lack of discretion and really complete disregard for these social norms and values, the prodigal son knew he could never come back. He lost his inheritance. If he set foot in this village, what would they do to him? Well, they'd cut him off for starters, but perhaps something more. He brought shame upon himself. He brought shame upon his family, and he brought shame upon his village, and he would never be welcomed back. Did the father know this? The father knew this. And what did the father do? The father stood somewhere in a prominent place. We're not told, either at the gate, the door of the family home, perhaps on a balcony overlooking the direction towards which the sun came down a narrow alley populated with people. He knew his son. The same way that you know your own children, their personalities, their tendencies, their character faults, the gifts that they've been given. And this man, in the same way, he knew his son. He knew his son would likely fail, and he hoped his son would eventually come home. He watched the busy streets. He looked the direction, the main way coming into town where his son left, and he hoped that someday he would see his son return. Why? Because if he wanted to see his son again alive, he had to beat the villagers to his son. He had to get to his son before the village elders got to his son and cut him off entirely and permanently. He knew that if he got there first, that perhaps this father could visibly show the son in a demonstrable way that he was reconciling with his son and that they would have no choice to receive him back as well. Are you starting to see the dynamic that undergirds this story? And the father knows that this is going to be costly. Why? Because of the shame of the son. To associate with this boy and to restore his son means that then the son of the shame is then brought upon the father himself. The son that the shame incurred, it rests upon the village to expunge this shame, to cut the boy off. And if the father goes out to reconcile, then the father willfully brings the shame upon himself. The son becomes so hungry enough to eat the food the pigs were giving, and the Bible says that no one would give him anything because that was pig food. You can't eat that. It's too good for you. Dehumanized, shamed. The boy said, "Well, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to prepare a speech saying, 'Dad, you know I've messed up, and I don't even deserve to be your son. But maybe I can work for you and get a little something to eat. Not knowing what would happen and not having any better options, the son begins to make his way home, and the father is watching for his son. When that father sees his son, he begins to run towards his son. Listen to me, this is a very important point. If you were a village elder, clothed in robes down that sometimes would drag the ground, walking in the streets with your dignity that comes from your status and your wealth and your age, you don't run. People may run for you, but you don't run. And here we have a father. And you can picture him pulling up on the hem of his garment so that he can run. And when he runs, you can see his legs, which brought an extra degree of shame. I spoke to a friend of mine, my first visit to the Middle East, which made me fall in love with the people and the language and the culture. It was a very isolated place, a place where Americans rarely or if ever would go. No oil, no reason for any significant development or foreigners to go there, but this is where my friend went to study a very unique and idiosyncratic dialect of Arabic. And I said, hey, what should I bring? It's probably hot over there. Should I bring some shorts? He said, don't bring your shorts. You don't want to show your legs. If you walk around in shorts, people are going to look at you like you're naked. People here do not wear shorts. You don't want to wear anything that's going to expose your legs above your ankles. So when you picture this man, traditional Semitic society, hiking up his robes and running to meet his son, he is doing something. They're not going to see the son. They're going to see him, which is perhaps part of the point, because as long as he can delay them from recognizing his son is safe. He makes a public and shameful spectacle of himself. He runs. He takes upon himself the role of a lowly servant. He meets his estranged, now pig herder son, and he embraces him, and he kisses him. And the son says, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I've sinned in your eyes, and I am no longer to be worthy to be called your son. When he was researching his speech, he was hungry and alone. He'd asked the father to make him one of his hired men, but here he doesn't. From commentator Ibn Atayib, from his tafsir, from his interpretation of Scripture, the Christian philosopher and theologian from 1,000 years ago in Baghdad, writes these words: the prodigal did not complete what he was planning to say, which was, make me like one of your hired craftsmen. Why? Because he saw from the running of his father to him and the grace-filled way that his father met him and embraced him, that there was no longer any room for this request. For if after such acts he made such a request, he would have appeared that he doubted the genuineness of his Father's offered forgiveness. In other words, the significance of this is not lost on the Son. In this humiliating demonstration of love towards his boy, for the Son to doubt the Father's forgiveness would to bring even more shame and rejection upon his Father. And he can't bring himself to say the rehearsed words. Father's extension of forgiveness is genuine. There's no question of his love, that he was not ashamed to be associated with this lost boy. And the Son is so overwhelmed himself that he cannot resist his Father's love. And it's time to celebrate. Because a son that was as good as dead was at last found by the seeking and watching, the praying, the running, the reconciling Father. Let me tell the story again. I had a loving Heavenly Father. I did not fully understand or appreciate his love, and in an act of rebellion, I said, I'm going to go out into the world to do my own thing, to get what is mine. And in an attitude of rebellion and selfishness, I did many shameful things that sometimes make me embarrassed and shudder when I think of them. Some things that still haunt me to this day. But when my world fell apart and I began to come to my senses just as the prodigal did in that pig pen, I started thinking to myself that I'd gone too far to be restored to the place of a son. I don't deserve to be treated any better than a slave. But when I found myself starting to make my way back to him, I found that he had already met me a great way off. That 2,000 years ago, not just a loving Father, but the creator of the universe, the one who spoke our world into existence, condescended from the throne, from a position of honor to a position of shame, in the likeness of one of his created beings. That for the human family that had gone astray, there was only one way to be welcomed home again, and that is for the Father to take our shame upon himself. That we could be restored to his image and set free from our sins and their condemnation. And he knew exactly what he was doing. The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12, that he endured the cross, that he despised the shame. Why? For the joy that was set before him. That's your reconciliation and mine. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, for our sake God made him, that's Jesus, to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. The selflessness and the self-sacrificing love of God displayed in the love and mercy of Jesus Christ and his sacrifice for us, I believe, is the most powerful force in the universe. The selfless love of Jesus. God does not draw us like a mule with a dangled carrot, luring us with some kind of reward. God does not drive us by beating us with sticks, seeking to manipulate us by fear of punishment, although there are plenty of ministers who've preached that sermon. But God seeks to woo us and draw us with his love, displayed so powerfully in Jesus. Can a love like this be resisted? Yes. Yes, it can. And it has been, and it is, and it will be resisted by people like you and me, by people like the prodigal son who are thinking, I'm probably not good enough. Why don't you just make me a slave instead of restoring me to the family? This is the greatest challenge of the Christian life, is to accept this love. It's to accept this forgiveness. It's to receive it. 19th century Christian philosopher Ellen White puts it this way. The Christian life is a battle and a march. It's hard. But the victory to be gained is not won by human power. The field of conflict is the human heart. The battle which we have to fight. The greatest battle that was ever fought by man is the surrender of self to the will of God. It is the yielding of the heart to the sovereignty of love. The greatest battle which we have to fight is the surrender of self to the will of God. It is the yielding of the heart to the sovereignty of love. Can a love like this be resisted? Yes. But in this moment, will you continue to resist it? Or would you be willing to say, God, very simply this morning, God, I see a glimmer of your love for me in this story of this man who just wanted his son back home, whatever his life course would have been, and took responsibility for getting him home safe. In this picture of this desperate, self-sacrificing love, I see Jesus, and I choose this morning not to resist his love. Is that your desire? The darkest corner of your hearts that perhaps no one has ever seen, hearts that maybe you have protected this for yourself, and Jesus says, let me just have that one idol, that one thing that you're cherishing, that one addiction, that one habit, that one view, that one philosophy that is strangling out your life. Let me have it, that you can live an abundant life. Perhaps you know someone this morning. Perhaps you're a parent and you're familiar with that sting of a lost child, a wayward child. Or perhaps you work with someone or know someone and they're off on their own. They don't have a place to go home to. They're lost, and nobody seemingly cares that they're lost. Are you willing this morning to pray for that person, to love that person, that like that father who said, I don't care what people think of me for associating with this boy who's brought so much embarrassment on himself and his family. I don't care what people think. If I run down that road and embrace him and pull him close and bring him in and feed him a meal. That is the purpose of this church. To be that kind of force in the world. And who cares what anyone else thinks? This church welcomes sinners like me and like you. Because this world is falling apart. We need each other to get through what's coming down the pike, because it's not over. And I pray that God will make us into that kind of church. Is that your prayer? Do you want that for us? Let's pray. Father in heaven, just so overwhelmed this morning by the love that's portrayed in this story. And we're quick to say, Lord, who is worthy of this demonstration of mercy and grace, knowing the things that we've done, knowing the life that we have lived, squandering our inheritance, our best energies on our own selfishness. And yet you step into the picture and you lay down your life without a fight, that we might gain the blessing that you deserve. Father, like that son, we pray. I pray for people in the sound of my voice that may be this morning a great way off. They might still be in the pig pen. They may have not even sensed any desire to turn towards you. But we pray that you'd help us, that you would with your Spirit awaken our spiritual desire. And when we respond in our own feeble ways, that you would, as you so desire, meet us a great way off and to welcome us back home. Help us, Father, to fight that fight, to believe that we are loved and can be loved, that you, in fact, do love us. And may we receive that love into our souls. May it transform us, and may we communicate that selfless love, that run down the road and wrap your arms around someone else kind of love. And may it transform and bless all of those around us. This is our prayer this morning, and we offer it to you.